I don't know. I don't know what to think with this home and road thing anymore. I'm kind of giving up on it. Like I said, I asked my girlfriend this morning to see if she had a real better answer. Her answer seems to be better than everybody who follows the team. You just get a better night's rest at home. I think that's the answer I'm going to go with. I hate sleeping in a hotel. The pillows, I like extremely firm pillows. Really firm. I have 3 extra firm pillows. I sleep with 3 extra firm pillows. And when I go to a hotel, I get these flimsy, half-assed pillows. And I just am not the same person the next day. I think that's what's going on with the Sixers. They need the extra firm pillows, and they're getting the half-assed pillows. Geoff Mosher's sleeping in a hotel. He's at the Combine in Indianapolis, and he joined us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. An update on everything that's happening in Combine land. And I gave Geoff Mosher a homework assignment out there. Geoff, what's going on?
What's up, Michael? And I sympathize with you, or maybe vice versa, since 4 of the 5 nights of this week I have not slept in my own bed, in my own house.
Isn't it making a difference?
I'm kind of a soft pillow guy, so I'm not minding it, but it would be nice to be home. Yeah,
the pillows that are afforded to you in a normal hotel just don't. I mean, I can't get a good night's sleep with those pillows. And I'm sure an NBA guy probably brings his own pillow, I would imagine, but maybe they don't. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, can't you request a firm pillow? And don't you?
I don't know.
Michael Gill stay at places where you can do that? I would think you could.
Well, I didn't see. I would never think to abuse that type of power, so it wouldn't even cross my mind. Someone like you, hoity-toity, saying, "Hey, I'm Geoff Mosher. Can I get a firm pillow, please?"
This punk Gill in 310 wants firmer pillows. Spit on them.
So I asked you something. I was listening to a podcast, all right? It was the Sports Media Podcast. Jimmy Trina is the host for Sports Illustrated, and his guest on the podcast was Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, and I heard something interesting in there. Now, I don't know if you had been able to do any digging on this as of yet, but in the podcast, Orlovsky mentions that he was offered a offensive coordinator job, but that it did not include calling the plays. So I'm wondering if he had interviewed with the Eagles. Now, anybody who watches Orlovsky on any of the ESPN platform shows knows how much of a fan he is of Carson Wentz. And in the podcast, he went out of his way to talk about how much he likes the Eagles offense and some of the things they do with the tight end. He thinks every team should have a tight end and be able to utilize this tight end. So any thought that maybe Orlovsky was one of the guys that was offered the position, because Doug Peterson said on Monday that they told people flat out they weren't going to get to call plays, and that removed some of the candidates. So have you been able to dig on that at all?
I have. Now, I have not spoken to Dan myself. I have not seen him around here. I'm sure he's here, but I have not run into him. But I did run into someone who's close to Dan, and from what I gather, Mike, and I don't know if there was an official interview, but I do gather that he did speak with the Eagles. Whether or not the whole not play calling issue was an obstruction, I couldn't say on that, but I think it is fair to say that had been an issue for some people. Now, you look at Dan, and with no coaching experience, I don't know how much someone in his position would be able to just demand to call plays, right? When you're you haven't really worked your way up that ladder. So I'm not sure if it got to that point even, or if it was just a cursory conversation or a formal interview. But there was some contact, I can say.
It's interesting because he mentioned that his goal is he would like to coach. That's something he wants to do. But he also said a goal would be to be a head coach, and that not calling the plays he felt was just not a good move for him at this stage of his career, and that if he was going to take a job, it would be he would want more responsibility. I found that to be kind of interesting because that's when I connected Peterson said that he talked to people and said that he didn't have play calling in this job, and I wonder if that turned some people away, which he said it did, and I just had wondered if Orlovsky, because I thought Orlovsky would have been an interesting hire had the Eagles had brought him in.
Yeah, certainly that would be interesting. I do have to wonder, though, how many guys have played the game, then maybe, retired, did a little TV, and then the first job they get when they get into the game is a play-calling offensive coordinator. That's
Well, wasn't Josh
pretty uncommon.
McCown's name brought up as a guy that was someone on their radar?
He was, and I don't. Again, part of that discussion though was probably you're in a role in which you're not calling plays. So
Yes.
because we all know Doug's going to call the plays, so I think that would be a pretty big and monumental leap for most people.
And look, I agree with you there. I just thought it might have been interesting to get him in the building. Now, if he didn't want to call plays and you don't want, you're not going to bend on that. I just felt, listening to that podcast and putting some of the dots together, I thought it was definitely interesting to at least scratch around and see what you could find. You're out there at the Combine, you and Adam doing the Inside the Birds podcast. Give us kind of behind the scenes on what happens at the Combine, why it's such a, kind of like a kickoff to the next season because there's so much going on out there, more than just the draft candidates getting ready for the draft.
Yeah, obviously everybody in the NFL is here. So that's every coach, almost every scout, every executive, every agent, and obviously all of the college players. So you kind of have two dynamics going at one time. There's the college kids doing their workouts, which are now on prime time. And it's kind of interesting from that regard, Mike, because all the talent evaluators are now in that stadium from about 3 or 4 o'clock, maybe until 10 or 11 o'clock, sometimes earlier. And those guys used to be done. They would do the morning workouts and things, and then they would maybe do some interviews and then have the night off. So it's a little bit different now that, you may want to look for somebody to talk to, right? And the guy's still at the stadium, clocking 40s and everything like that. But yeah, so that's going on. But
not 40 ounces, Harry.
No, not 40 ounces. I hope not. But then at the same time, you got all the business stuff going on, and that's changed a little bit, Mike, too, in the last few years because of the advent of the tampering window, right? That 3-day tampering window that they have before the start of free agency. Whereas in the past, here in Indianapolis, if a team really had interest in a free agent and the player, the GM or the decision maker or the agent could meet somewhere and do their tampering in the back of a restaurant or a bar, and numbers are discussed, and you kind of left Indianapolis with an idea of who's going to cost you what and whether or not you realistically could get that guy. And now, because of the window, it's more like discussions. People are afraid to start giving out numbers now because they don't want that leveraged in the next 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the tampering period. So now you get more framework ideas, or is there interest, what might it take type of conversations.
I was wondering,
it's just different.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that talk the main focus of what's going on at the Combine? The splits of the sides. You got high-profile players, Russell Wilson, J.J. Watt, as very high-profile players kind of coming out against this CBA. Is this something that is kind of hovering over top the Combine?
Well, it certainly is, and that's probably a reason why numbers, especially this year, seem to be harder to come by. Interest, not so much. I mean, you can kind of keep your ear out and figure out who's interested in who to an extent. And obviously, when we drop Inside the Birds on Monday morning, Adam and I will have an extensive podcast on what we've heard here in Indianapolis and as far as who the Eagles are interested in and what they're thinking. But, yeah, that is holding things up a little, although I did hear today a person I spoke to felt pretty confident that this thing is going to pass. Now, listen, I'm sure a lot of people have said that, and yet here we are, and it hasn't passed yet, but we'll see.
You guys have some interesting takes in the latest Inside the Birds. One that I want to get into is something that Doug Peterson mentioned on his press conference earlier in the week. Was he kind of sounded like he wanted to bring Jason Peters back, and you guys said in the podcast, if they bring Peters back, that tells you that they are worried about Andre Dillard's development. I don't know that I 100% agree with that, but I'm interested to hear your reasoning why you feel that is.
Well, that's how I felt at the time that we recorded it a couple of days ago, right? And now, obviously, being here, you you look into it a little more. And now, Mike, I'm with you. I'm not sure I agree with myself either on that initial take. Although I think if you heard the pod, what I really said was that kind of move would suggest that they were concerned. And I said I think that's a ridiculous concern to have, because the times he played poorest was when he was asked to play right tackle, not left tackle. When he had to play left tackle, he was not bad at all. I mean, certainly room for improvement, but we're talking about a rookie here in the footsteps of a Hall of Famer. And I just, you go look at we talked about the Seattle Seahawks in the podcast, right? I'm sure it wasn't easy for them to cut ties with Richard Sherman, to cut ties with Michael Bennett. They cut ties with a lot of the Legion of the Boom, Cam Chancellor, right? And it would have been easy to say, well, you don't have anybody nearly as good to fill that hole, but that's the business. And they've still been able to be competitive without those guys because they've kind of reshaped themselves. And I think that, Jason Peters, if he doesn't come back and they go ahead with Andre Dillard, maybe they're not as strong at left tackle as they have been for the last 2 or 3 years until Dillard really built himself up. But maybe you're stronger in another area, the way the Seahawks now are a really good running game, or they have a better passing attack so that they don't need their secondary to be a shutdown secondary. So that's just life in the NFL. If Jason Peters comes back to me, it's because of who he is and his relationship with the owners, the owner Jeffrey Lurie, and the fact that they just love him so much and think that they can keep telling themselves he's playing at a high enough level that he should come back. But I look at it and I say, I don't know how you stand up in front of a microphone and talk about, when you're Howie Roseman, and talk about getting younger and not being sentimental, and then and then make that move.
Yeah, I agree with the kind of haphazardness of the comment, but I also understand how bad line play is. And yes, we look at Peters here in a vacuum and not look at the rest of the league. He's still one of the better 5 to 8 left tackles in the league, and it is kind of getting and you have him signed, right? It's not as if you're bringing him back as a free agent, correct? I mean, he's already under contract.
No, he is a free agent.
Well, that changes the dynamic a little bit. I thought he had another year left, and he was saying, I want to play again.
No, I'm fairly certain he's a free agent.
All right. Well, that would then, if they signed him in that capacity, that might tell me a little something different. See, I was under the impression that he had another year left on the deal, I thought. I have to check that out. But in that case, that changes the dynamic just a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to talk you back into your original thought.
I know, right? I'm playing mental gymnastics.
He is a free agent, by the way.
Right.
He signed a one-year deal, $5.5 million in 2019, guaranteed to $3.5 last year. His contract is up. He is a free agent. See, yeah, now I don't understand why you would sign him to come back. That kind of changes my thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, and so it's, you're right to say that it's not really the worst thing in the world to bring back Jason Peters, because he still plays at a high level compared to the left tackle level that is played. And then it just becomes a question of your messaging. Your messaging was bad because you said you weren't going to, you're trying to get younger, and here's a spot where you can, and you actually have the in-house successor. You don't have to worry about who you're replacing him with, and you're still not going with him. So I guess you can live with bad messaging if the end result is a good product, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's my bad on that. I thought he had another year left on the deal, and it was like, hey, if he wants to come back and play, it was like he's going to retire with a year left on the deal. But in this case, if you're signing him to come back, that's kind of interesting. All right, another thing I saw you guys talk about, Adam Kaplan says the Eagles definitely want Byron Jones. That's a pretty powerful statement right there.
It's a powerful statement, but it's also a very accurate statement. And I can, just also concur, just basing what I'm hearing here down in Indianapolis too. Now, it's easy to say you want somebody. How do you get that person, right? The issue that there's going to be is how many teams are going to want Byron Jones. And so you go look at the top teams with money to spend, because he's going to cost a lot of money, probably north of $15 million a year, right? And you look at the teams that A, have money, and B, need cornerback. I think you could probably put the Jets in that category. You could probably put the Broncos in that category. You could put the Raiders in that category. The Eagles are obviously in that category. When you have 5 teams that have money, and you're talking about a position like cornerback that is so coveted, it becomes a bidding war. And so the question is, will Howie, who has not been the biggest spender in free agency over the last 3 years, win a bidding war? Will he get into a bidding war, which kind of goes against what they've been doing since he came back? But, Mike, when you look at their situation, and you can make an argument that they need 2 corners, 2 receivers, a lineman. I mean, they have a lot of holes, right? 2 safeties. You can't fix that all in the draft. So the big takeaway for me is I think the Eagles are going to be more active in free agency this year than they have been in a while. Now, I don't think they're going to be as irresponsible as they've been in the past, all that money into say like Nnamdi Asomugha or chasing after Javon Curse because he's the number 1 pass rusher on the market. I think they'll be still judicious, but they are going to spend money more so than they have recently.
That's another, that's the kind of thing, too, that gets fans excited, but I don't know that says that you're going to be a good team. If you're spending a lot of money in free agency, it gets you excited in the offseason, but we know that the winner of the offseason typically does not win the regular season.
Right, you hit it on the head. You're excited because if you're a fan, you hear a big name and a good player, but it's you're about to pay top of the line money to a corner who I'm not sure has made a Pro Bowl. Maybe he's made one. I'm not sure. I have to check on that. I'm not saying he's a bad corner, but what I'm saying is you're paying that money basically because Sidney Jones has not been what he's supposed to be. Because if Sidney Jones was a Pro Bowl linebacker or even just rounding into really good starter form, then you wouldn't have to shell out $15, $16 million for a cornerback. And the same thing with, say, like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now, we can't close the book on him, but if he had certainly shown potential as a rookie, like many of the second-rounders, first and thirders did this past year, then maybe you're not thinking I need 2 wide receivers this often. Maybe you're just thinking I need 1, and it doesn't have to be a first-round pick, So the reason they're going to be active in free agency is because they weren't able to develop fully some of the kids that they've drafted. Look at the receivers. We talked about Shelton Gibson, right? He didn't pan out. Now, I know he was just a 5th-round pick, but they just haven't gotten much from some of their drafts.
Yeah. Geoff Mosher's at the Combine in Indianapolis, and we saw yesterday some of the receivers. Ruggs really raised some eyebrows, and we all saw the video of Doug Peterson sitting there. What is the scuttlebutt about the receiver position out there? We know it's loaded, but just how deep and loaded are we hearing?
Well, I think, as it pertains to the Eagles, Mike, it's going to have to be through the draft because when you look out there at wide receiver in free agency, there's Amari Cooper. I don't think the Eagles are going to be in Amari Cooper at all. So you can cross him off the list. He may not even become a free agent. We'll see. And then who's after that? Emmanuel Sanders, 31. Again, you're going to bring in a 31-year-old wide receiver when you just said you're getting younger? I just don't see that. And then there's kind of a drop-off. There's the Demarcus Robinson, who's not really a speed guy, and that's the one thing that you constantly hear here in Indianapolis about the Eagles is that they're looking for speed. They're looking for speed. So then you get into a case again where, Brashad Perriman, that's nice. Maybe they bring in Brashad Perriman. I don't know, and I haven't heard anything yet on it, but that's not something that's going to make all the fans, get really excited. What would make them get excited is if the Eagles got Henry Ruggs. But he just blew up the Combine to the point where I've actually heard from 2 different people today, Mike, that they wouldn't be surprised if he was drafted higher than Jerry Jeudy. So now you're looking at a case where at one point maybe you were hoping that he would be there when you picked and maybe fell a little bit. Now it's like, well, if you want him, you're going to have to trade up to get him, which I don't know if that the Eagles are averse to doing, but that's what it's probably going to have to take.
Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned that because last year we know you see guys with the speed, and the Eagles kind of took the one guy who didn't have the speed. Now this guy comes out and blows a 4.2 into 40. Teams are not going to allow that mistake to happen again. You're right. I've seen many mock drafts where Ruggs was actually the pick after the Eagles at 22 when the Eagles have gone with T. Higgins at 21. Now, these are mock drafts, but it tries to give you an indication of what area the player might be drafted, and I don't think anybody sees Ruggs being in the 21-22 spot after this weekend.
Not at all. Not at all. It would take a mirror. It would take something Laramie Tunsil-ish, I think, to have to knock him down on the end. And of course, we never hope for anything like that to happen. So no, not at all. And T. Higgins, I can't. Even if he's there for the Eagles at where they picked, was it 21, right?
Yes.
I again, speed. There's a lot of speed in this draft at wide receiver. And by the way, if you don't get one in the first round, that's okay because it's a really deep draft. So there's a second round, third round, fourth round. There'll be some names. You know, a guy like Denzel Mims, for example, from Baylor, has raised a lot of eyebrows. You know, who knows what round he'll go in. You know, second, third, fourth, like you're going to be able to get it. But I can't see the Eagles coming away with another 6'4", 215-pound guy who runs a 4.6.
Yeah, and I guess Claypool's been raising eyebrows out there too. He's a guy that you know, wasn't in the same name dropping as the Ruggs and Higgins and Judy out there, but all of a sudden Claypool has put his name in. I mean, I don't know if he jumped from a second rounder into a first rounder.
I don't know, and see, that's the funny thing. You always want to beware of the guys that maybe you didn't know much about, and then they burned it up at the combine. It's just like you want to beware of the guy who has great tape and, you know, didn't run the fastest 40 in the world at the combine, and now you're down on him. You know, ideally, the scouts want the tape and the testing to match, but sometimes it doesn't happen, and the difficulty is figuring out whether it didn't match because of something that they didn't catch on film or it was just a bad day.
Yeah. Well, Claypool, to me, would be my favorite senior. Now, everybody else is an underclassman that I would have ranked ahead of him. I know you know a little bit more about KJ Hamler. He's also a redshirt sophomore, so he's even a peg down in terms of youth from the rest of this group.
Yeah, disappointed that he didn't run the 40 here at the combine. And, you know, I know Penn State has a nice, fast, downhill type track that the kids like to run at because it's, you know, it's their home track and it's good and they get the better times, and so maybe he's saving it for his pro day. Would have been nice to see him kind of compete here in that regard at the combine. I have heard from a few people that he's the type of guy that when you turn on, he's a quiet kid. When you turn on the tape though, and you start asking him X's and O's, that he lights it up right there. That's where he wins.
All right, the combine. How's the weather out there?
It's funny because when I left, I'm like, oh, you know, the weather's not going to be bad. It's just it's basically going to be cold like it always is. But it has, like, I'm looking outside right now, and I'm inside because of it. There's snow flurries coming down. There's just constant snow flurries every hour and a half or so that are not in the forecast.
All right, well, have fun with that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Geoff Mosher is live at the Combine. Follow him for more from the Combine this weekend at Geoff Mosher NFL. And the next Inside the Birds podcast, look for it to drop on our website, 973ESPN.com. All right, man. Enjoy the rest of the snow.
All right. I'll see you soon.
All right, Bob. Geoff Mosher, everybody. Of course, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He's in Indiana for Inside the Birds.